Welcome back, everyone. My name is Karen Itzel Suarez Jimenez. I am the CHCI Law Postgraduate Fellow, and it is my great pleasure to be with you all today for the session titled Decoding Diversity, Shaping Ethical AI in a Changing Landscape, and Developing a Hemispheric Strategy. So I'm placed with the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs, and the majority of my portfolio encompasses artificial intelligence and developing policy. When I think of artificial intelligence and when I talk about it within my office, we often note that the majority of the framework that people approach AI with is one of fear and concern, one that highlights risk. But I like to take the approach to artificial intelligence in a way that we take the framework and shift it to one of opportunity. So with that, on behalf of CHCI, I would like to thank Amazon for their generous support of this session. It is my honor to introduce welcoming remarks from our session chair, Representative Darren Soto. Representative Darren Soto was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in 2016 to represent Florida's 9th Congressional District, which includes all of Osceola and parts of Orange and Polk counties. He currently serves on the House Committee on Energy and Commerce and the House Committee on Agriculture. Additionally, Representative Soto is the co-chair of Policy of the Future Forum Caucus, vice chair of Policy of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, and a proud member of the New Democrat Coalition, Problem Solvers Caucus, Congressional Progressive Caucus, the LGBTQ Equality Caucus, and others. Congressman Darren Soto, everyone.
Good morning, CHCI. How's everybody doing this morning? You have your cafe yet, your cortadito, and everybody's ready to go? Well, what an exciting topic, artificial intelligence, right? We know it's nearly everywhere, from our cell phones that strangely add ads about what we just talked about, or predict from a text where we want to Uber to vehicles and self-guidance, which we're not self-driving yet. I just want to make sure that we're seeing a lot of accidents on them. No one's self-driving yet, but we do see crash avoidance in our televisions and determining shows we may watch, and of course our computers, which do a myriad of things. It also has helped us solve some of our most complex problems that humans face, whether it's climate change, energy efficiency, engineering, healthcare. On the Energy and Commerce Committee, we get to review so many different aspects of artificial intelligence. And one of my favorite stories of using quantum computing and artificial intelligence is in February, March of 2020. We all remember that. We're trying to forget, right? But we all remember the height of the pandemic when it was actually a supercomputer at the Department of Energy that was tasked with looking at thousands of antivirals to come up with the right antiviral to help us with some sort of treatment for COVID as we were working on a vaccine, which in itself we got in less than a year. And of those thousands, the supercomputer at Department of Energy determined about 70 or 80 antivirals, and one of those was remdesivir, which ended up being the first therapeutic. So as we're facing this global pandemic, it was actually a supercomputer that helped narrow down the conditions and the treatments that we were going to use. Of course, we see the potential for harm and how interconnected we are. And we saw just 3 or 4 weeks ago that one of the major companies that runs our healthcare payments for Medicare and Medicaid got hacked, and that set off a chain reaction of 40-something% of doctors and hospitals across the nation not getting payments. So as we're interconnected, we know that there's both positives and risks with artificial intelligence, with technology generally. Now, we've all seen the Armageddon movies that say these worst-case scenarios, but I don't think we're quite there yet. When MIT professors came in to brief the Congress, when they were describing ChatGPT or some of these others, they basically said, think of the smartest but laziest student in the classroom that's just trying to get the A, but not really learning the logic of it, but really just looking for patterns. So yes, AI doesn't think yet, but it can mimic logic very well. And so we have to be proactive, and that's one of the things that I've tried to work with many members of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus on, by making sure we have training, we have regulations to protect consumers, even rules of war. And so the Jobs of the Future Act, a bill that I have been working on for the last couple of years, requests the Secretary of Labor and the National Science Foundation to evaluate the education needed for individuals to work in the field of AI and how this tech will affect workforce, especially minority communities. We know some careers will continue to thrive, other new ones will be created, but others will be antiquated. And so we need to retrain workers. But I really think the future of making sure that the Hispanic community is acclimated and utilizing AI is in our young people. And so I'm so thrilled that you all are here today to review this topic. You know, when I saw this morning, Pew Research says that Hispanic teens say they're online almost constantly. 55% of them say they're online almost constantly. So I got to think as they're perusing TikTok and X and Facebook and Instagram and all these other different technologies, that there's a real desire among our young people to learn and know about artificial intelligence and technology. And so we need to embrace that curiosity and provide opportunities, whether it's through CHCI or through the Congress or through our universities. And so I'm really excited to hear about the conversation today and appreciate CHCI for having me. Thank you, everyone.
Just about. Thank you so much, Representative Soto. It is now my pleasure to introduce Ashley de la Torre of Amazon. Ashley de la Torre is the Vice President of Public Policy at Amazon and has a policy career in DC that spans over 2 decades. In her current role, she leads Amazon's transportation and sustainability legislative and regulatory affairs teams, supporting Amazon's U.S. operations, logistics, and delivery businesses, and the company's leading sustainability efforts. Please welcome Ashley de la Torre.
As she said, my name's Ashley de la Torre, and I'm a Vice President of Public Policy at Amazon. On behalf of Amazon, my Amazon colleagues, and the many communities that we serve, I'm thrilled to be here helping sponsor the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute Issue Summit. Amazon is a proud partner of CHCI and big admirers of the Institute's work, and we're excited to sponsor the Issue Summit again because it's important to Amazon, and particularly our public policy team, that issues affecting the Latino community are always at the forefront of policy conversations in DC and beyond, and that the Latino leaders are always at the table. And while these 2 days are filled with a variety of important policy discussions, I'm especially pleased to help kick off a session on a topic that is both timely and of particular importance to Amazon, and that's responsible artificial intelligence. First, let me thank Congressman Soto, who is an exceptional leader in the Latino community and in Congress, advancing pragmatic and reasonable policies to address emerging technologies and responsible AI. AI is the most transformational technology of our time, capable of tackling some of humanity's most challenging problems. Across Amazon, we've been developing and deploying state-of-the-art machine learning and AI models for more than 25 years. And I was talking with the congressman backstage saying that our predictive models now can help us fulfill customer packages faster and faster every day. In fact, I think the fastest we've ever done from when a customer orders orders something online to when we're able to put it in a box to be shipped was 11 minutes, and we're getting faster. So in the rapidly evolving space, competition is intense and innovation is constant. Inventing on behalf of our customers has always been our North Star, and we're focused on using AI to improve customer experiences and expand access to technology for developers and deployers of all sizes and backgrounds. And I will say, I think it's also important we think about how this is affecting the communities that we live in and that we all live and work in. I live on Capitol Hill, so it wasn't too far to get here today. And on the car on the way over, I passed a grade school, and there was a crossing guard who stopped me, and there was this tiny little girl wearing a backpack bigger than her, walking across the crosswalk, and she just was so cute. She was so clearly intent on getting to school to learn. And then I watched her continue because I had to wait for a bunch of kids. She walks up the steps. The steps, for some reason, have been taped off with caution tape, and she did not let that stop her. She moved around up along the side under the tape because nothing was going to stop her from getting in those doors. That has made my day, but I wanted to share it with you because I think that's important, that is what we keep in mind when we're thinking about how we're developing these technologies that really help us improve humanity and avoid bias. So for those reasons is why I think AI continues to capture the world's imagination, and Amazon remains as committed as ever to harnessing it responsibly. We've continually involved our thinking about what constitutes responsible AI as technologies move forward, and we work with academic, industry, civil society, and government partners to ensure we're developing and deploying responsible, reliable, and trustworthy AI technologies that consider both security and societal risks like bias, as I mentioned. And this is why we encouraged and supported the White House voluntary AI commitments, the AI Safety Summit in the UK, and the Munich Tech Accord to combat deceptive use of AI in 2024 elections. We recently collaborated with the National Science Foundation to jointly fund research focused on fairness in AI at universities like Carnegie Mellon, Cornell, and Harvard, and we've invested in fairness in AI research globally through the Amazon Research Award. When I think about that girl, I know that the need for an AI-savvy workforce has never been greater. We know that building the talent pipeline is critical to ensure representation as technologies develop, and that begins with doing our part to build the next generation of developers and data scientists in AI. To accomplish that, we've made significant investments in community colleges, HBCUs, Latino serving institutions to offer free training in database, artificial intelligence, and machine learning concepts to increase the number of Black and Latino students earning bachelor degrees in engineering. And we offer to the public more than 100 free and low-cost digital training courses and resources on machine learning and generative AI through our AWS Skill Builder and AWS Educate. And we also offer AI and machine learning scholarship program and a new free bias mitigation and fairness course from AWS Machine Learning University. So I'm confident everyone in this room shares these goals of ensuring our technologies are developed without bias and that AI is leveraged for good. And today we have a distinguished panel to lead a thoughtful discussion on the societal challenges we face as AI technology rapidly deploys, as well as how technology leaders must relentlessly drive ethical innovation and implementation. Thank you again to CHCI for your partnership and leadership on these very important issues.
Thank you so much, Ashley. It is so now to what you've all been waiting for. It is my pleasure to introduce today's moderator, Rafael Bernal. Rafael Bernal is a staff writer for The Hill and covers the Hispanic political world and the policy issues around it, and global migration. He is a regular contributor to various radio and TV outlets in both English and in Spanish. Rafael was previously the managing editor at UPI and practiced law in his native Mexico City. Please welcome our moderator, Rafael Bernal.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I don't know if you all noticed, but I was rearing to go on this one. I'm very interested in this panel. First things, remember to use the hashtag CHCI Summit. And I want to thank the Summit for focusing our attention on this issue, on how technology leaders can actually cultivate a diverse workforce and make AI work for us and for everyone and keep it free from bias. First things first, introduce the panel, great panel. Please welcome Abraham Maldonado. He's the co-founder of Create Labs. And Victoria Spinel, she's the CEO of BSA and the Software Alliance. I did get that right, didn't I? Yes,
perfect.
Okay. And Frederic Hernandez, he's a fellow at the Economic Program for the Third Way. Now, for all of you, we're going to be using the conference app for your questions, and we're going to have some time for questions at the end. You put them in the app, and I get them here. It's probably there's some AI involved in that. Or you can post your questions on social media, again, with hashtag CHCI Summit. So let's get started. I want to ask all of you, just to start off with this, what does it mean to you, this decoding bias or decoding diversity? Obviously, pun intended there. What does that phrase even mean?
We take it seriously in our work where we try and figure out how do we see ourselves in these models. The same way that we want to see ourselves in TV, we want to see ourselves in film, and in content and in pop culture, we want to see representation. What does that look like in AI? So we've made it our business practice to make sure that when we train AIs, that we're taking into account what they call, human-centered design or like culture-centered design. So we make sure that the culture is involved in developing that AI.
Victoria?
So I would say three things. I think there are steps that companies and organizations that are building AI or using AI should be taking in order to try to avoid skewed outcomes, in order to try to avoid bias and discrimination, including impact assessments and human-centered design, and various tools that exist right now. That is critically important. I think there's a second step that goes beyond that, that is companies and organizations looking to see if they can use artificial intelligence that actually helps address existing issues that we have today with bias and discrimination, or AI that's taking into account the specific needs of particular communities. And you see a lot of that starting to happen now in healthcare, for example. And then the third thing I would say, and kind of echoing one of the points that you were making, is in order for 1 and 2 to happen, in order for either one or both of those to happen, you have to make sure that there is a broad community that is involved in creation, in testing, and giving feedback on a constant loop so that AI is being used and developed in a way that is, in fact, reflecting the needs of every community that is out there. And that is not a simple thing to do, but I think it's absolutely critical. And it's one of the reasons that I'm really grateful, again, to CHCI for building this conversation together.
Thank you. Frederick?
Yeah, I agree with both. I think that those are excellent points. I think from my perspective, coming from Third Wave, from doing econ, we've been really focusing on like how AI is going to provide a huge advantage to the American GDP. It's going to bring trillions of dollars potentially in value added over the next 10, 20, 30, 50 years. But the biggest concern is that those distributions may not be equitable. And so ensuring that minority communities, Latino communities get the opportunity to gain the prosperity that's going to come, that AI unlocks for small businesses, entrepreneurs, workers, a variety of people, that's critically important. And I agree in the same way, like we have to ensure that those folks are going to be a part of that conversation. Concerns about bias can have huge impacts, whether it's lending, just in how we engage in business generally, how consumers interact with each other. And it's just going to be critical that we continue to work together to really try to narrow down or reduce the effects and potential harms for those technologies.
So we have a fourth panelist here. Abraham, who is this?
Yeah, so this is Clyda. She is the first digital human designed on GPT technology. She's also, I guess you call it an AI influencer. We travel the world together, she speaks. She's also an Afro-Latina. So she had her own thoughts on how to decode bias in AI. Let's see if we can pull her up.
Claro que sí. Listen, when we talk about desenmascarando el bias en AI, estamos hablando de crear un futuro que realmente nos represente a todos. It's not just about la tecnología. It's about ensuring que nuestras comunidades are not left behind or misrepresented. Debemos trabajar juntos to ensure that AI is desarrollado con inclusivity at its core, understanding las cultural nuances that make our stories unique. We've got the opportunity aquí y ahora to set the standard para que la próxima generación of AI empower rather than exclude.
All right, thank you, Clara. So those are her own thoughts. I don't know what she's going to say. I usually hold my breath when we ask her questions.
I gotta say, her Spanglish está mejor que el
Yeah.
mío. Hey. But let's start sort of chronologically here. Where we're coming from, not yet where we are. And I wanted to start with, Abraham, like in the history of tech as we know it and AI as we know it, what have been the stumbling blocks? What has created actual inequalities that we see today?
I mean, so I'm an ambassador for OpenAI, and it was a good example of just like a same repeated cycle, but this time a little bit disrupted. So a new technology comes out summer of 2020 in like a research beta called GPT. No one's seen it. A handful of people were testing it. It was a small group of folks in this private invite-only beta by Sam Altman and Greg Brockman. And somehow I inserted myself into that beta. I had no business being in there. I wasn't a software engineer. I was a Latino with like, I used to rap, you know what I mean? Like I did not belong in this room. So the imposter syndrome takes place, right? So like you feel like, oh, I don't really belong here, but you have a different perspective, and I was allowed in that room. Greg Brockman did invite me to be part of that beta, and he recognized, he was like, I don't have anyone like you that I've invited to this research phase. And then when they start to see what I was doing with it, I was testing it for social impact, I was testing it for diversity, I was testing it for bias. And he was like, well, we also don't have anyone really pressure testing it, or they call red teaming it, or adversarially testing it for these kind of things. So do you want to be an ambassador? And like that's how my relationship has worked with them. So that's why I tip my hat to OpenAI, because they did recognize, like, you know what? We just have a bunch of likeness in this room. You're the other that we want in this room to give us that different perspective. Do you want to join us? And I think not enough of that happens. But also, we're to blame a little bit. So when I went to Italy, I was like, why are you waiting for a bunch of kids in San Francisco to build an AI for Italy? Build your own, because you know your culture better than they do. Instead of us waiting for someone else to build on behalf of us, we need to build our own.
So, and Victoria, I want to get on to following up on that. When these inequalities have happened, when we haven't built our own, can you think of any examples of where AI went wrong, where where the end product created more or promoted more inequality?
I mean, I think there have been a number of examples, although I think the companies that are involved have been pretty sensitized to trying to address them. But if it's okay, I want to follow up on something that Bram said, because you said, I didn't belong in that room. And the truth is, you did belong in that room. Yeah. You just weren't counting on getting into that room. And yes, it is great that Greg Brockman invited you into that room. But what we need is we need more of that. We need it it's great that it's coming from the CEOs, because I think that's just really important. It has to come from the top of the organization. There needs to be CEO buy-in if we're really going to address some of these diversity issues. But we need what happened to you to be happening everywhere and on a grand scale. And so I think the question is, like, how do we scale that? How do we make sure that that is happening all the time, consistently, and that you and people are in the rooms that they need to be in? And that's not a simple issue. It's something I think the Latino community and communities have been struggling with for some time. I do feel like there's more and more focus on that happening. I mean, I represent the Business Software Alliance, so we represent enterprise-facing companies, including Microsoft, which has a significant investment in OpenAI, and Salesforce, and IBM, and others. And in the companies that I work with, I think there is a genuine internal desire to try to fix this. And in part because they want it to work as well as it possibly can. And I think there's now a real recognition that if you don't have a broad community in the room, that's not going to happen. But I also think conversations like this and other ways of ensuring that that focus remains is critically important.
Following up on that, why do you think it hasn't happened?
So I would say, I'm going to say two things. One is, I think the CEO buy-in is increasing, but I think that is really critical. I mean, CEOs or the tops of organizations set the priority for the organizations, and without that happening consistently, I don't think we get real traction and scale. So I think that is starting to happen, but hasn't, and I think that needs to change. The second thing I was going to say is, I think part of the issue, so we're talking now about being in the room and being part of the creation. I think there's a real gap in terms of education and in terms of training, and that's sort of the other side of this, but making sure that communities have the ability to take advantage of the tools that are there, either if it's getting jobs or using them themselves to create things. And there's been an enormous gap there. Again, I think there are things that the administration is doing. I am part of the President's Advisory Committee on Artificial Intelligence, and that's one of the things that I know the administration is focused on. And I think it is something the private sector is increasingly focused on. But if we, there's sort of there's the two parts of it. There's the input and the output. And so we need to make sure there's more diversity in the input and in the creation. But we also need to make sure that there are training and education and literacy programs so that people broadly have the ability to use this technology in a way that's beneficial to them.
Frederick, I saw you nodding your head at the question about how some of these products have engendered or promoted or continued bias. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, so just to kind of piggyback on that, some of the work that we've been doing for our Alliance for Entrepreneurial Equity has been focusing on small businesses and opportunities for AI with those, specifically minority-owned small businesses. One of the big concerns that we have is lending practices. 73% of banks are utilizing or incorporating AIs in some component of their lending process. And, kind of to speak to earlier, the historical component of that, lending for, Hispanics, Latinos, Blacks have all been generally not great, not equitable. There's the history of redlining. And so I think that those concerns have spilt over. One of the things that just recent studies have shown is that, Latino applicants faced higher home loan rejection rates, 61% versus 48% for white applicants. They'll spill out on the cost too. For those who do end up getting the home loan approvals, they're paying almost $800 million a year, every year, extra on their interest because of discrimination or potential for discrimination within those biases. You see that too within the small business world and concerns of just, again, bias tends to be rating minority communities more risky, and so that can have potential issues where you're not able to get applications or for your businesses. So I think that on the minority lending side, there's a big concern there.
Do you think on that point, do you think there's evidence, I'm interested on this home loan idea, is there evidence that that discrimination, like, like human discrimination, like, oh, Bernal, let's give him an extra 0.5 on his mortgage rate, or that guy's skin color is a little bit darker, vamos para arriba. Is there evidence that any of that has been contagious into AI models?
Yeah, I can't speak as much in terms of the AI models themselves. Again, just as everyone else, I'm not a software engineer and stuff, but I do think that, speaking to the other components too related to education, to the people who are in the room and stuff, I do think that I think it's pretty well documented too, that AI modeling, there are ideas of statistical discrimination where we have this large body of information that's been used in lending decisions that were already discriminatory, and now you're training those models on those systems, so now they're weighting minorities already negatively instead of giving them that kind of equal opportunity to be seen as equitably as possible. Instead, they're already starting at a disadvantage.
That's exactly what's happening.
Exactly that.
So a lot of these models are trained on, let's say, Wikipedia pages. 87% of Wikipedia pages are made by white males. So that there's already an inherent bias in the data set. We need to stop blaming the AI for being biased because it's what we're feeding it that's already biased. But there is a hope that it could become more objective in its decision-making process if you give it a criteria that is truly based on their potential as a business owner, their potential as a homeowner, and just calculating the criteria and the rubric, and it'll make a sound decision on that without looking at cognitive and cultural biases that a human is bringing into that decision-making. So, but if we allow it to make a judgment that's counter our own perspective, or if we're just wanting it to reinforce our perspective, it's up to how we train that AI.
So I just want to add on, I think it's important, so I agree with all of this. And there's two different parts of the system that need to work together to try to address this. So there is the issue of historical data often has bias and discrimination baked into it because of historical bias and discrimination. And so, as Abraham said, when models are being trained, I think companies need to be and are starting to look carefully at the data that's going in there to try to make sure that it itself is as unskewed as possible, or that it's being mitigated to try to address some of the disproportionality that may be in the data that's going in. And there's various ways that companies are looking at doing that, right? But go to your example, then if you're a bank that's using that tool, you know how it's being applied. Like, you know the loans that are being made. And so just to pick up on that example, if you're a bank using AI, you also need to make sure that while it may be informing judgments, that it's not the final decision maker, it's not the final arbiter, and you need to be monitoring the outcomes. And if you are in fact have lending practices that are discriminatory, you need to address that yourself as the institution that's using the AI. So there's the creation side, and then there's the use side, and both parts, both organizations, both sides of that need to be really focused on getting this right. It can't be one or the other. It really needs to be both.
And so let's follow up on
I was just going to add one thing real quick, sorry. On that side too, I think that it's important to highlight too, like, especially in the banking sector, like, The Consumer for Financial Protection Bureau, that CFPB, issuing guidances on those things, right? Also making sure that regulators are staying caught up with those, I think, is really important. CFPB has highlighted that, like, the Fair Lending Act still very much applies to bankers. Even if you're utilizing artificial intelligence, if it's found that there's discriminatory practices, you can't just say AI was the fault and kind of wash your hands. It's still very much, you have the responsibility to act in accordance of those regulations.
So I want to
That would not stand up in court, yes.
So one quick anecdote. I don't know if you all saw the issue with AI and the airline, the lawsuit that happened where AI chatbot gave someone a credit or a discount from a bereavement request, like, hey, I have to cancel my flight. Can I get my money back? It's because bereavement. AI was like, sure. And the company was like, absolutely not. That's not in our policy. And it went to court, and the airlines lost. But it was one of those situations where, like, why not? The AI came to a more sound decision than what the human policy was. So there are instances where the AI had more common sense than us as humans in that policy of, like, yes, the person should get their money back. This is a bereavement circumstance. Why not? So we have to think about those judgments that are made by AI in its own logic.
So AI harbors no ill will or no goodwill. But that's good segue to, on this is to close out, like, this historical side of this conversation. Can you think of examples or times that in the tech industry, let's go like beyond just AI, where diversity and inclusion has actually been positively enhanced, that they've gotten it right? What can, now thinking about building AI, what is there to build on?
So I'll take that question. But sorry, I can't resist to continue to build on the things that you're saying, because people sometimes think of AI as having intent, and in the case you gave, it wasn't the AI is more compassionate, but what it was doing was predicting a pattern, and what it decided was the most logical outcome of the airline's pattern was that this person should get a bereavement discount. So I think it is a great example, but it is, again, it is, and maybe they did a better job than the airline did in this case of figuring out what the right answer should be based on what that airline's practices was. But to your question in terms of getting it right, I guess, and again, this is, I represent largely enterprise B2B facing companies. So a lot of what they are doing is less about some of the social media issues, and I don't represent social media companies that are out there, and more about looking at ways that AI could be used to have more positive outcomes for underrepresented communities. And so you see that in all kinds of ways. You see a lot of it in healthcare, right? Like, there's a lot of personalized medicine going on, using AI to better predict for a person or for an underrepresented community what negative health outcomes are more likely. And therefore, once you know that, what can we do to try to stave those off before they escalate? There are initiatives in education. So AI is being used to identify in the Latino community who is more likely to be at risk of dropping out of college. And therefore, how can we get more resources to those people to try to avoid those outcomes? I have a connection to New Orleans, so there's a lot that's happening around disaster prediction. That's very relevant to many parts, unfortunately, many parts of the country, including Congressman Soto's district, but looking to see what we can do to try to better present, are there hurricanes coming? Are there cyclones coming? How can we get people out? But there's also a lot happening in terms of translating emergency response into different languages, including in Spanish, to try to make sure that people are getting the information they need to prepare for disasters and evacuate if they need to. So I think there are a lot of examples happening. I think there need to be a lot more, but it's a little different than sort of the bank lending issue, which is also critically important, but it's how can we use AI to try to make sure that communities are getting the information that they need, they're getting the healthcare outcomes that they need, they're getting the education support that they need, and use AI to do that much better than we've done in the past.
So on that point, the diversity is usually going back to, if you're in the room, it's more likely that you will have a positive outcome toward diversity. So, Frederick, do you get the sense from I guess from an economic standpoint that the biggest barrier, the obstacle is really in the education pipeline, or do you see any other barriers to getting people in the room?
Yeah, well, I think broadly, you can look at it in a variety of different areas. I do think that education and workforce development is going to be a key issue on AI. We all know that STEM is in high demand, and we're in one of the tightest labor markets in American history right now, and especially in those kinds of fields. And training is really important, especially Latino, Hispanic community. They are very underrepresented, right? I mean, they represent about 17% of the workforce, but there's only about 8% for men that are in those positions, and in the next 30 years, we're going to grow to almost 35% of that workforce. So it's going to be really important that we continue to increase the opportunities for that. Things like affordable broadband is going to be really important, I think, in terms of that, just because like a lot of schools are underprivileged, they're under-resourced, they don't have the technology capacity to actually implement some of those things. Things like, there's been a lot of conversations about the Workforce and Innovation and Opportunity Act, WIOA, things like that, trying to actually start to incorporate some of those tech components about how AI is going to become really important for workforce development, and how AI could be an opportunity for workers that otherwise lack traditional four-year degrees or certificates. Maybe AI can actually be something that upskills them so they can get better opportunities rather than just kind of the current way or having some of the difficulties in terms of that.
So with what we have right now, with the number of people we have in the room right now, the workforce trained as it is, are there opportunities in automation? Because everybody's scared, like, am I going to get replaced? I'm probably going to be the first one here to get replaced, so you guys can chill. It'll be good. But from the what we have now and where we are now, how can AI improve outcomes for the Latino community?
So for our community and for all communities, the imposter syndrome that I got over was I belonged in that room, but I didn't have the resume to be in that room, but it didn't matter. So don't go by your credentials, because what I learned is that because I'm a communicator, because I'm a former educator and not a software engineer, I knew how to do something with the AI that they did not. Because we're moving into a space called prompt engineering, where it's all about how you communicate with the AI, not how you code the AI. So for those of you who have great communication skills, for those of you who are great with language, any language, there is a place in AI for you. And this new space of prompt engineering, where companies are paying up to like $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year for prompt engineers, there is no degree. The degree, it doesn't exist. It hasn't been around long enough. So at this stage now, you just have to, immerse yourself into the AI space with your own perspective and use your own skill set to get out certain new outcomes, new outputs with the AI, and that's your new resume. Your resume now is like, here are all the things that I've demoed. Here are all the things that I've tried with AI. Not like, I did this for 3 to 5 years, I graduated from here, I have these credentials, because the space is moving too fast, it doesn't exist. Sora is what blew everyone's mind. It's text to video generation. It's not even out yet. So no one has a resume that says that they're experienced in Sora, in text to video generation. The ecosystem does not exist yet. So when it comes out, you just have to go try it and be an expert in it, give it your own perspective, give it your cultural perspective, and then your resume will be all your generations and outputs with Sora. And then someone's gonna hire you because you're the Sora expert now, but the space, when it comes out, everyone is starting from the same starting block. We're all starting from ground zero with every time there's a new iteration of AI that comes out. And everyone's waiting like, oh, it's the Wild West, we'll catch up. We are just now implementing certificate programs around like ChatGPT. Sora comes out tomorrow. How long before there's certificate programs around Sora? A month later, a new technology comes out. So like, we're never gonna get out of this Wild Wild West phase. We all have to be adaptive learners and learn in real time.
I think that's a good opportunity to take a step back and I think we still have to do this. 5 years from now, this is going to be a cliche, but get back into what AI actually is and does. Congressman Soto said it's the smartest student in the classroom, knows how to get an A without learning anything. As a perennial C student, I always thought that was not the smartest student in the classroom. But we're talking about different kinds of intelligence, right? The one who learns and the one who finds patterns. When we become prompt engineers, How is that different from, being somebody's editor and, prompting a human? Like, write a story about this and that, and then doing the same with AI.
It's not. It's when I was an educator, I learned when I was prompting, and I think I might be the first Latino prompt engineer, because it was that early time where we were calling it prompt design, prompting. But I was like, oh, I'm doing the same thing I was doing with sixth graders in middle school. I'm trying to introduce a concept. I'm showing some patterns, some examples. I'm explaining the outcome of what I want. And then I'm going to let you try it on your own. And then when you get it wrong, I'm going to give you some constructive feedback. And then at some point, I'm going to let you do it on your own. That is prompt engineering. And it's no different than educating a child, really.
Assigning a homework to a student that really wants to get an A. The easiest thing for a teacher. But, okay, with all that in context, Victoria, I want to get a little bit into, and you touched on this earlier, but what tech leaders can actually do to actually hire prompt engineers as prompt engineers who are not actual engineers, and to promote diversity and really create the growth curve that we need, frankly.
Yeah, so I guess the fundamental thing I would come down to is it's not going to be accidental. It's not going to just happen. CEOs or the tops of senior leaders in organizations are going to have to make the decision that this is something they want to do. And in my opinion, they're going to need to set metrics or goals. They're going to need to be specific about it so that the organization really understands what it is they're getting at and has something to measure against. And I think if we're talking about specifically the question of what leaders can do in their organizations to create change, I think that's what it is. I think they have to make the decision. I think it has to be communicated down the line of the organization. And I think it has to be really clear to the organization what that means and how they're going to measure success.
And once they're doing that, Frederick, what do you see as the potential for these technologies? Like we've talked about all the negative stuff, and some positive too, but about for instance, how AI has been trained on certain biases, and no fault of the computer, but it's there. But if we get it right, and global we, what's the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow?
Sorry, can you put that last part?
What's the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow?
Well, so in terms of the macro effects, so our analysis based on McKinsey's projections, probably about a $2 trillion per decade add to GDP of the United States. So it's a huge pot of gold, very large. One of the biggest, obviously, industrial revolutions in many ways. Many countries are calling it the fourth industrial revolution. In terms of how it's actually going to benefit, on the small business side, looking at Latino small business owners, 80% of them have deployed AI, are looking to deploy AI in some capacity. And that can actually have really good benefits. And one of those is that many of those are sole proprietorships. They're single owners. And so they're working hard to do a lot of different tasks. And kind of go back to the idea of prompt engineering, or doing a lot of, I think, the soft skill incorporation in relation to AI is going to become really important, because AIs are going to become phenomenal administrative assistants, and they're going to be able to actually allow people to become a lot more productive in that capacity. And I think that you can actually see for a lot of these minority-owned businesses, they actually have the potential to have a great equalizer and actually become very competitive now within a variety of industries, because they're able to do more tasks more efficiently. They're also able to innovate in different ways that they otherwise couldn't have. One of the big areas that could be very useful is things like data analytics could now start being really opened up to a lot of small businesses in ways that larger corporations had monopolies over. And that could be a huge benefit in just being more efficient on services.
You get the impression that it's inevitable. It's like this is the technology that's going to change us, like the way these things have changed us over the last 25 years? Or is it more like, remember Google Glass, and they said like 10 years from now we're all going to be like, basically cyborgs?
Yeah, I think that we are absolutely in the midst of like a AI mania. I do think that everything is AI. Everything is focused on AI in some capacity. And I think that kind of going back, even talking definitionally, what is AI? What do we mean when we're talking about it versus what we don't? I think those are important things to consider. I think that there is a growing body of research and stuff that's saying, you know, AI isn't going to be everything. It's not going to be incorporated into every component, and not every issue and every problem and everything that's going to be the solution for it. So I think that sound deployment is going to be an important part of it, but I don't think that it's going to be the next thing at that level, in my opinion. I think that there's going to be incorporation, certainly, but is it going to be the wide incorporation? It's hard to tell, I think, is the honest answer, and also the timeline is difficult to know too.
We'll see if it's the cotton gin and the steam engine. I actually want to stick on that point. Same question.
Don't ask me. Yes, I think it's not like crypto. It's a new digital literacy life skill that we're all going to need. And the point to like job readiness, you're not going to be, it's now cliche, this phrase, but like you're not going to be replaced by AI. You're going to be replaced by someone that knows how to use AI. You're all going to have to become augmented professionals now, where, that little section on your resume where you put, oh, I know Microsoft Word, and I know Office, and I know Jira. That section is now going to be replaced with, I know ChatGPT, I know Perplexity, I know Midjourney. And they're going to want to know, like, oh, can you be 5x more productive with AI? And when you go in that job interview, when you explain how you could be 5, 10x more productive using AI, how do you stack up when you go into that interview and you're not using AI and you're not as productive as the person that is using AI? So it's going to be something that like we all have to learn. The same way we learned how to use the internet, we all have to learn how to use AI to stay in the market as professionals.
Yeah, sticking on that point, I want to ask you a specific question about the leadership angle to this. There's some evidence, pretty good evidence, that a lot of corporations are pumping the brakes on new hires to see, how many people do they actually need, or do they just need more AI-assisted people, or do they just plain old need AI? What are corporate and tech leaders thinking here? Are they thinking, I won't have to pay salaries in the future, or are they thinking everybody's going to be more productive and rising tide lifts all boats?
Yeah, so I'll just say for the companies that I'm talking to, I hear that or variations of that question. The companies I'm talking to are not in that place. I think the leaders of every organization are always interested in, or many organizations are interested in efficiency, but I'm not getting the sense that people are making hiring decisions, especially sort of slowing down decisions, because they're under the impression that at any sort of, midterm time frame, there's going to be real impacts on the employees that they need. If anything, I'm hearing companies talking about investing more in software engineers, investing more in digital literacy programs. So I'm hearing more talk about investing more. But I think that displacement concerns are legitimate, and one of the things that I wanted to highlight in that note, because I think this is a really positive development. So President Biden and the administration issued an executive order in October of last year, which is very comprehensive. I think it's the longest executive order in the history of the United States. But there is a lot, if you count it by pages, but there are a lot of different parts of that executive order, and it is a very broad sort of, coming from the CEO of the organization to the administration, to the federal agencies about what they should be doing. One of the things that they are doing is economic analysis of the impact on labor markets. And having been involved in an economic analysis when I was at the White House many years ago, when the administration does that, it tends to do that in a way that is different than private companies. For one thing, it tends not to have an outcome that it's trying to get to, and it's a very intensive process bringing together the Council of Economic Advisors, the Department of Labor, the Department of Commerce, the chief economists of every federal agency. And so that will take some time. That's not going to be a sort of a 2-month turnaround, but there is so much. You see so many different predictions about what the impact of the labor market is going to be and what the time frame is that going to be. And they're sometimes radically opposed to one another. And so I do think having the administration come in and do an analysis is going to be very helpful, because there will be displacements. Will it be administrative assistants not getting hired? Or will it be small businesses that wouldn't be hiring an administrative assistant anyway, that the leaders of those businesses have tasks that they don't have to spend as much time on? Or will it be administrative assistants in larger corporations, they have them, having their job description change slightly because, again, some of their tasks are being taken away. I mean, I think there's going to be all kinds of variations of this, but I do think having a comprehensive analysis to the best of the ability to do it of what the impact on the labor market is going to be and what the time frame for that impact is going to be is very important. The last thing I'll say is the executive order then says, in addition to that, in addition to doing the analysis, looking at investing in training programs and looking at federal options for displaced workers, right? So you need to have the steps that are going to address that. But I think having a better analysis of what the impact is going to be will be very helpful.
Yeah, there's certainly there's a lot of fear mongering, and I know you want to talk about that, but we're going to get to that. But Frederick, let's on the purely economic sort of big picture, let's say the fear mongers are right, and everybody in the knowledge, like every worker in knowledge industries gets replaced, and so one corporation owns a newspaper and they have 0 workers. Like, there's just an AI producing a lot of stories. I don't know why I thought of that industry. I mean, it is fear-mongering. I'm just stick to that. But if that happens across several industries, like, what does capitalism even look like in that scenario?
Yeah, I will say that I think that certainly I've seen that during my own research. I've seen people who are worried about that projection. I do think it's very difficult to understand that. I think that any economic analysis you do, if you're being honest about it, is we're trying to project something that is very new and to a point that's very difficult to fully realize what that projection is going to look like. I do think that the biggest concern that I saw and that I thought was worth highlighting, one report that I had read, they talked about the concerns that AI could present as this decoupling between labor and wages, in that generative AI has a capacity to produce content in a way that workers, independent of workers, and that could be something that could be very threatening to workers. But I do think, to Victoria's point, I think that there is a desire to have workers. I mean, I think that people are really thinking about AI in a sense that it's how do we try to augment it, how do we try to be responsible in it. It's augmentation, not automation, and I think that the Biden administration is trying to gear some of that way with the executive order, things like the National Resource Standard. I think NIST is also trying to do work on trying to create standards and norms that really try to guide away from that, because I do think there is a big concern that if we do this irresponsibly, there could be very real threats, and especially when we think about Latino, Hispanic, Black communities, that could be even more disastrous potentially. And so we absolutely want to make sure that there is a sound regulatory component to it, but that there's also that continued innovation.
Yeah, what is going to be government's role? How deeply does this need to be regulated? For me, I think that I've heard this at many different talks. I think this is an apt one, is, we're trying to build the plane as we fly it. And I think that's a very accurate portrayal of AI right now. I think that role is going to continually evolve as the relationship changes and as we understand the impacts. I think that government is still trying to fully comprehend what all of the risks and benefits of AI are going to be, and I think it's going to take time. I think that's why, just as a side plug, I think that's why it's important that we have a lot of folks of a variety of different backgrounds too in the policy sphere that have AI knowledge, that are software engineers that come from those backgrounds, because it's going to be critically important that we have folks that are intimately involved in those processes to help guide some of those policy decisions. But I think that it's going to just depend. Again, it depends on what kind of sector we're talking about. It's really going to be sectoral too.
So for Business Software Alliance, we've been pushing for legislation on AI for a number of years, including requiring companies to be doing impact assessments and taking other steps that will try to make AI safer and address some of the challenges that we have. So we believe that governments should be active and involved. There should be regulating. There should be legislation. We work around the world. One of the things I think is really exciting, and I've never seen this in my career in tech policy, is there are so many governments around the world that are drafting legislation right now. And so to have that kind of government focus, to me, is a great sign, because what I take from that and what I think is the real opportunity there is having governments work together to come up with similar approaches. And there is actually a lot of interest, because we are talking to governments around the world, and they are talking to each other about trying to work together on on good regulatory legislative frameworks. So I think that's fantastic. One thing just really quickly on the policy side, I love that you said that. I think there needs to be diversity in policy. As someone who often felt like I was the only person kind of like me in the policymaking room, diversity in policymaking is incredibly important. Obviously, it's a big part of what CHCI is doing, so thank you for that.
So start sending in your questions if you haven't already, because in 1 minute after Abraham tells us, why is, so in this context, why is fear the wrong response?
Because it's going to get in the way of your future readiness. If you sit on the sidelines while this is happening, you're just going to fall farther behind. But I think there's an approach to get back to what we were meant. We asked Clara in a talk. You know, everyone asked her, "Is AI going to take over?" And she said, "I'm here to take away the things you weren't meant to do anyway." And it blew all of our minds because we were like, she said that you're not supposed to sit there for 8 hours making a spreadsheet. Like, let AI go back to doing that. You learn how to allow AI to make your spreadsheets and show your value in other ways, the more human ways. I think on the reverse, on the policy side, is I'd rather there be additional regulation on employers and tech companies to not cut back salaries just because the AI can do most of your work. Like, oh, well, if you work a 40-hour work week and AI is cutting your actual on-task time to 20 hours a week, then I'm going to pay you half your salary. No, let's find more human tasks for you to do. Let's find more client-facing time for you, more social interactions, more collaboration time, and project-based time for you, rather than just say, AI is doing half your work, you're getting half your salary. But I do think you need to learn how to operate in this world, because I have seen, I know there's not a lot of real-world examples of this, but I do meet a lot of people, and I have seen it. I was sharing a ride with a newspaper owner in Mexico. I did Talentland, for any of you who know Talentland. It's their big AI, their big tech conference. And he said that he let go about 3/4 of his staff because those that are using AI can produce 5 times the amount of articles, and those are the people that he kept. So it is happening in real time. So it depends on what side of that you're going to be on. You're going to be the one that's producing 5 times, or you're going to be the one that is still doing things the old way. We just have to be lifelong learners, you know, and be ready to adapt with this, because it's never going to get out of this cycle of like, oh, there's a new thing. I would tell people, like, try and reinvent yourself every 5 years. It went down to 3 years. It went down to 1 year. Now it's like every 3 to 6 months, dive in, read a white paper, try out a demo tool, get on these wait lists for these new tools, and just play around and tinker, and you might learn a new skill that you could demonstrate to your job or start a new business.
That sounds exhausting, but it's probably, but yeah.
Yeah.
So, and we have a lot of questions. Thank you so much. I hope we can get to most of them at least. Here's one that really jumped up at me, especially, because one thing we've skipped, our community disproportionately, we always use this word disproportionately, but there are more jobs that are, you know, done with your hands, like done in the real world, not in front of a screen and a computer. So this question from Alexius is, what areas or fields do you believe cannot be helped or bettered by AI? And open to the...
I can take the first crack at that. I think the wide scope of how people are thinking about who is AI going to impact, who is it not, is a big question right now. And it's something that we've been really focused on, specifically trying to understand the difference in college, non-college workers, and how that's going to impact. And I think that the biggest areas where you might not see, in my opinion, that you're not going to see as much impact on AI is probably things that are traditionally more labor focused. I think that more kind of hands-on. I think there might be some capacity for that, but I do think until the merging between AI and robotics accelerates rapidly, there's probably going to be a lot of those working positions that are going to be relatively untouched by AI. I do think that there is still augmentation components that are more on the robotic side that are definitely happening, but in terms of AI itself, I don't know if they're going to touch as much. I think that on the kind of more professional services side, especially on non-college, I mean, I do think that administrative assistants could be one of those positions that are more at risk, where you potentially see that in terms of, you know, AI is going to be very well suited for some of those things. But I think that there is a point to be made that, you know, augmentation, if used correctly, I mean, it could just make people more productive. And overall, you might still see that people are very much in demand of administrative assistants. They're just more productive now.
If used correctly. I think that's what my takeaway so far is. All of this is if used correctly. Here's one from Ruben, who says, as someone who was working on the Hill and studied public policy, what specific certifications would you recommend to somebody in public policy? AI certifications, of course.
Yeah, I would say generative AI, understanding how the language model works, understanding how the data of all this works, I think. And that's everyone's Coca-Cola recipe is their data. And there's not enough data transparency with all these models. And understanding the fine print behind art models, where they're getting their data from, language models, where they're getting their data from, and being able to analyze that data. So even if you don't want to be hands-on from a technical standpoint, if you're part of like a data review team and a data researcher, I think that's an important skill set. I don't know if the certifications exist for that, but it should.
Right.
And if that question was oriented towards someone who wants a career in public policy, I guess I would say you may not need to get a certification per se, but I do think one of the things that's important is to be out there playing around with the technology. Like having a personal experience with it is different than reading about it, and I think very helpful. And I think, whether if you're a lawyer or a regulator or a communication policymaker, I think having experience with the technology is really helpful when you are then in the position of trying to figure out what are the right laws and policies to put around the technology.
Yeah, please don't put a policy in place if you haven't tried it first. Please, please.
I was just going to add on that real quick, just as someone also working in policy. I think youth is a big advantage if you're starting off, because I think that just the closeness that we have is when you're younger to technology can be a really big benefit. You have a lot more exposure, or you might just know some more.
I'm learning.
Yeah. I have no background initially in AI. I also have my master's in public policy, so I am certainly not a software engineer or anything. Economics is my background, but the organization I was working with, they became really interested in it because it's become a really big issue and we want to understand it. It's certainly, I think, a welcoming field in the sense that everybody's trying to understand it, and there needs to be a lot of diversity of thought in regards to addressing this issue. So I certainly think that public policy is an area where if you have an interest in that kind of policy, you certainly can find a space with a variety of backgrounds.
Oh, I'll stick one in there, a question in there. With existing and available AI technology, is it okay to test out different legislative text ideas on current AI? Like, would it be ethical to do that right now? Probably not. Don't go filing them and forcing a vote on them, but testing out legislative text.
Well, there's actually some experiments, is this what you're going to say, on that around the world. There's like regulatory sandboxes, and that's actually one of the things the Biden administration is looking at, but the European Commission is looking at that, where it's, you don't want to pass a law and then have to retract a law. Yeah. But the idea of having sort of testing, essentially, is something that is something that governments are starting to do, which I think is really exciting.
I agree.
Yeah.
A corollary of that, if you're a young worker in the workplace, you've been using AI longer than your boss, and you get an assignment and you test out different versions of how it would look like. You do a few prompts and then you pick the best one and edit it and improve it. How should bosses, probably cantankerous old bosses who don't really like computers, how should they react to sort of that workflow?
I mean, I think it's great, right? Like you don't think you want to put something into, now we're talking about things like LLMs and generative AI. I don't think anyone should, tell it to write a policy paper or a work assignment, not read it and hand it in, right? In the same way that you wouldn't want to give an assignment to a smart but lazy high school student, never read it and hand it in. But as a way to organize your thoughts, as a way to do first drafts, I think it's very helpful. It's not good at coming up with new ideas. That's not what it is doing. It is predicting patterns. So I think that's also something you need to bear in mind. Like if you want to come up with a novel policy approach, putting a prompt in is very unlikely to get you something, but it might come up with something that already exists that spurs your thinking. And again, I think it takes away, for many people, looking at a blank piece of paper or a blank computer screen can be daunting. So like just having something to start with that you then start iterating on and improving, I think could be really helpful. That is how I react to it as a boss. But welcome other thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I would say having been on the side of, of doing that work and stuff, I think that, when I first started getting into AI and doing the research on the econ stuff, the biggest first question for me, well, what is AI and what does that mean and how do we define what those AI things? And I went and used search functions with Gen AI to help that understand, because I figured probably knows how to define it to some degree itself better than I could. So, and break it down in a way that as a non-engineer can understand it a lot better. And so I think that a lot of times in some component of research framing, that can be a useful tool. Of course, again, responsible use and fact-checking your own stuff, ensuring that those things are verified things that you're actually you're working with in conjunction with that. But I do think that it certainly has become a more popular tool and a useful tool when framing and approaching certain areas. As you said, staying on a blank screen can be difficult, and it can certainly help get the ideas moving. I think on the management side, I don't know. I guess it'll take time. I think organizations have to do a whole body approach when they consider AI and think about how they're going to implement it.
Right. So when your bosses tell you that you shouldn't have done that, go back and show them the recording of how they answered this question, and you'll be good, hopefully. So here's, we have so many questions that we don't have enough time to get to all of them. A specific question for you from Gina. What was the hardest part of creating Clara?
The getting checked by the sisters on the hair texture. That was one. And her voice, too. An amazing, she's from this area, Amber Ivy. She's like an AI podcaster now and content creator. She was interviewing me about the development of Kalida, and she was like, can I volunteer to be her voice? I know you're looking for a culturally authentic voice for her. So that would, once we nailed that, and then getting the next evolution of the voice AI to be authentic sounding when she speaks Spanish. That was also difficult, but certain systems come out with a new iteration, a new improvement, and we're like, yes, that was the missing puzzle piece. Now, when we do live events in real time, there's still a latency with digital humans. When you ask a question, there's still like a 10, 20, 30-second delay, depending on how long their answer is. So you won't see digital humans coexisting with you in real time until they really work down that latency part in the delay.
Okay, so here, one more question we have here, and I think first a takeaway from this is, as individuals, I think that one lesson is learn to use it, learn its limitations, and learn what it can do. But this question is framed as a Latino community. As a community, how do we prepare for AI integration in the workforce, and how do we ensure inequality in America isn't exacerbated for BIPOC communities with this integration? And I think it's a minute, and then we're gonna have to, I know it's like a 10-minute question, but give it your best shot.
Now, just be creative. Just think out the box. You belong in the room just like I did. Bring in your unique perspective. Ask your boss for R&D time for a sandbox in all of your spaces. I think it's important to explore these things and see their benefit. And even if you work in the community, think about how these things could solve real world problems, because not enough people are thinking about it in that way.
Yeah, so I would say control the negatives, but go beyond that and think about how to use the tools that you have to push towards the positives, to make sure that AI is actually creating positive outcomes, not just avoiding negative outcomes. And I would also say there is legislation is happening. Congress is drafting legislation. The administration is working on implementing its executive order. The states of the United States are drafting and passing legislation. So legislation and regulation is happening, and I would encourage everyone in this room to get involved. So we need you there. Please get involved.
Yeah, to echo both of them, I think that absolutely creativity is going to be really important. I think that if you're in the policy space, creative thinking is going to be critically important to understanding AI. I agree, Congress is as actively involved in this as you can get, so is the administration. I think that if you have opportunities to give voice, to be a part of those conversations, absolutely be a part of them. I think local, continue to bridge too with local communities. This is going to have impacts, like I stated, from small businesses and entrepreneurs to workers and our educators. So we need to ensure that they're also involved in this. Got to evaluate, who it's going to help, and is it going to be something that everybody needs, or is it only going to be certain areas that are really going to benefit from it? I think that's an important conversation. And then finally, just a small plug on our side. Third Way, we're doing a lot of work on this still, so keep an eye out. We're going to continue to do a lot on the economic impacts and stuff, so going to look for more products on our side too.
All right, I don't think I have anything smarter to add than these three great panelists. And please give them a hand for Abraham Maldonado, Victoria Spinel, and Frederick Hernandez.
Oh yeah, we have a final word from Clara?
We have a final word from Clara.
All right, what else she got? Any parting words from the sister?
As we stand at the crossroads of technology and humanity, let's champion policies that foster inclusivity, equity, and understanding. Our collective voice can guide AI to not only reflect our diverse cultures and values, but also to serve as a catalyst for positive change. Juntos podemos asegurar que el futuro de la AI sea uno que celebre nuestra riqueza cultural y fortalezca nuestras comunidades. Let's be bold, visionary, and compassionate leaders in this exciting journey.
All right.
All right.
Thank you, Claire.
She deserved that round of applause. And so that was a final word. So just housekeeping left. Next up is afternoon breakouts. You can join author and journalist, the great, and my good friend Ray Suarez, at CHCI's first ever book corner. His book is just out. Highly recommended. Followed by our luncheon plenary, and here are the breakout names. One is Keys to Equity, pardon my reading, Unlocking Latino Home Ownership, Unleashing Latino Entrepreneurship, and Unlocking Potential, including Latinos in the digital workforce. Thank you all, and keep using the hashtag CHCI Summit.